Giving Pittsburgh a better alternative. Giving Pittsburgh.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pittsburgh Current podcast, live from isolation once again. I'm actually in an undisclosed bunker somewhere below the original hot dog shop in Oakland. It's quite safe. Welcome today. We got a good show today. We're going to be talking about elections. I also want to let you know that the new edition of the Pittsburgh Current the digital edition of the Pittsburgh Current is out and ready for your perusal. We've got stories on the local efforts by the community food bank to make sure that folks have plenty of groceries through this pandemic. We also have some great stories by Meg Fair and Brittany Haler on Meg wrote about how drag performers are able to get their work out and try and make a bit of a living through this. And Brittany's got a particularly poignant story about folks who are dealing with the loss of a loved one and the fact that having that traditional funeral is harder than one thinks. So check out the new issue of the Pittsburgh Current out right now, and the new issue will be on not stands, but in your I'm still used to saying stands in your email box next Tuesday. Also we have a new piece of our ongoing investigation of COVID-19 preparations at the Allegheny County Jail, or lack thereof. So check us out for that, and check back on our website, pittsburghcurrent.com. We're going to have more on that as the days go on. So my guest today, we're going to talk about voting, and we're going to talk about getting out the vote. And with us today are Larissa Schweitzer, the Pennsylvania State Director for NextGen America, and Sarah Egan, the spokesperson for NextGen Pennsylvania. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us. Thanks so much for having us. So
a lot of people are probably familiar with NextGen America. It was founded by Tom Steyer, who most people know as a former candidate for presidency of the United States. And the organization is on the ground recruiting young voters in Pennsylvania. And I believe it's a $4.5 million effort. Is that correct? And you're looking at voters in what sort of age group?
Yes, so all that's correct. We are running a program here in Pennsylvania to really engage those 18 to 35-year-olds on college campuses, in communities around college campuses, to make sure that they have the tools, the pieces of education to be ready to go out and vote in the upcoming elections.
And obviously this is not what this situation, the COVID-19 situation, has obviously made this a different animal. How has this changed? And I talked to some candidates about this actually too. Like, how do you, especially first-time candidates who are trying to get their names out, like how are you operating in this time of isolation? So how has it changed what you guys are doing? And are you messaging any different, or is it just in the delivery, or how's it working out?
Yeah. So I always describe our program, we're super strong at talking to young people face to face. It's where we are trained on. It's what we love to do and why we do this work. So this transition to online organizing has been super interesting. We've really focused on text banking voters, peer-to-peer texting, and phone banking, informing them of Pennsylvania's new primary date, how to apply for a vote by mail application, and still talking about the importance of the youth vote in this upcoming primary and the general election. Sarah can probably talk a little bit more about this, but we've also really been focusing on telling our stories through letters to the editors, and talking about the importance of the youth vote in letters to the editors. We've also been utilizing our personal social medias to get out those conversations organically to our followers on Twitter, on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all those platforms.
Sarah, did you want to maybe expound on that a little bit about that effort?
Sure, yeah. So we know that if we engage young people on the issues, that we find that young people are very much issue first voters. So what we do is sustained advocacy now through November to make sure that people turn out. We know that the more that we engage with people, the more touches we have, that they are more likely to turn out. So where in the past we would meet people on the ground, meeting them online just means that we're talking to them earlier, and sending those materials through text and email a lot earlier. And then reaching out to networks that we might not be able to see when we're meeting them in person. So social media feeds, a lot of Twitter threads, a lot of TikToks, and getting more people out to vote that way.
I would think that one thing, events have always sort of probably been an organizing period. And so are you organizing virtual events as well? And how are you finding the response to this, this sort of new, not new, I mean, obviously you use this technology, but on such a high level, how are you finding the response to that?
Totally. Well, to talk about how strong our program is, we have to include the conversation about volunteers, right?
Right.
Our program is 100% definitely sustained by our volunteer base. And one of the ways that we've been keeping them engaged and interested is having virtual one-on-ones with them. So we hop on Zoom, we have the conversation about, hey, we transition to texting and phone banking. How can we get you involved in that? How many texts will you send with us next week? How many voters will you call next week? We're also kind of transitioning to like you said, the virtual events. I know nationally we're really focusing on panels that we're having, talking about the issues that young people care about, like climate, like affordable healthcare, all of those important issues. And it's been really fun to kind of see and brainstorm the ideas of how we can engage young people via these virtual events that we're focusing on.
And what events are, or what, I'm sorry, not events, what issues are young folks focused on? I mean, obviously COVID-19 brings out the need for healthcare reform and global healthcare. But is that the main issue? What are some of the main issues that they're asking about and talking about?
Yeah, we've talked to hundreds of thousands of voters since we've been on the ground in Pennsylvania since 2016. And we found that young people care about college affordability, affordable healthcare, racial equity and justice, climate change, immigrant rights are really the top line issues. And young people are paying attention to these
Yeah.
issues. We've watched how Trump and the GOP attack the rights and values of young people, and we know the strength of our numbers. And if we organize around those issues, we're going to turn out and vote.
And Sarah, what's the messaging in terms of when you're talking about Donald Trump, when you're talking about the Trump administration, you're talking about Republican lawmakers who just seem to be completely blind to the actions of the president? What's the messaging when you're talking to young voters, or how is it? Are you trying to sort of incite that sort of, I don't know about anger or rage, but sort of that, whatever that is inside of us that makes us sort of like, why are we living in a time like this? What is the messaging like when you're talking to folks?
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously that anger is always there with young people. You can see we're straddled with debt. We are inheriting a climate that we won't be able to raise children in. Millennials can't buy homes. I mean, those issues are always going to be very relevant to your everyday life. But at the same time, with messaging, I think it's really apparent, and I think it's very important that we take it to a local level at the same time. So we're holding Pat Toomey accountable for him wanting to opening up the stock market, or like paying attention to more of the stock market than the issues at home right now, or the Pennsylvania legislators who are right now voting whether or not we are going to reopen the economy and open those non-essential businesses. You'll see a lot of our people online keeping those legislators accountable, and then really connecting that this is something that you need to bring to the ballot box, that if you want to have progressive change happen, you have to be part of that change by volunteering or by getting out the vote yourself and participating in events that we're doing and with our partner organizations as well.
And is that something that let's talk about that a little bit more, the opening up of the reopening of America, or whatever the hell the president was trying to call it. Where are younger voters on this that you're seeing? I mean, I know a lot of people are just like, look, this is the reality of the moment. Let's not, we're already in it. Let's not screw it up by maybe going too early. Is that what you're feeling on the ground level?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're seeing that disproportionately a lot of the people who are unemployed right now are young people. So they're feeling the economic repercussions of this very hard. I mean, we've already seen some legislation come through to help with the federal student debt, but I think on the ground we're seeing just the ridiculousness of the Republican response, and then also a kind of a rallying cry where you're seeing that this is obviously symptomatic of a system that isn't working. And if young people want to be a part of creating a system that will work, we've really been trying to convince people, and I think people are really receptive to it at the same time, that this is a moment where you can really bring forward your advocacy to make a change. But yeah, it is, we are paying attention, and I think young people will have a long memory for this.
Right. Larissa, are you encountering out there, because as much as I sometimes find it hard to believe, there are young people who fall on that sort of right side of the political conversation. Are you having conversations with them? Are you engaging with them? Are you seeing a shift with some? Because again, now this is like, this is you. Look, a lot of us probably, when we went out on our own, went to college or whatever, we might have still had a little bit of the influence of our parents in our ear, and we kind of have to find out who we are. But this is one of those situations that I think really speaks to what's wrong with that sort of right ideology, and they're feeling it through the fact that, again, they're out of work. There's not a whole lot of help out there. So do you encounter folks on the right side, and how do you address them, and what are you feeling from them in terms of any frustration?
Sure. I will say, we do talk to people who fall across all ends of the spectrum, and I think one thing that we encourage folks to think about when we're talking to them are just what Sarah is talking about today with the GOP House votes yesterday and going into today with the Senate around reopening non-essential businesses in Pennsylvania. The people that we spent all of 2018 into 2019 working to get elected are the ones who are fighting for young people and the values of young people, right? And putting them as a priority in each of their votes yesterday and today. And that's the conversations that we have to take to people who might be, one or the other, and making sure that we prioritize pushing them more left, knowing that
Sure.
issues that they care about are falling more, left.
Right. And I had a brilliant follow-up to that. I'm not going to lie, but it's gone. But let me ask you a little bit about you talked a little bit about, so this is a presidential year, but you're also very concerned about down ballot races, aren't you? And how are you addressing those?
Yeah, I think it's case by case. We are in all the big counties in Pennsylvania: Erie, Allegheny, Lehigh Valley, Philadelphia, Central PA, where we have super important opportunities to flip congressional districts and hold congressional districts that we won in 2018. And we noticed that when we talked about those races in 2018, that people were driven to vote in those races. Those specific issues that those Congress people, those state House and state Senate members are fighting for in the PA House and PA Senate are directly affecting young voters who go to college, who might be having a young family. And when we're talking about those races, people are definitely driven to vote in those as well.
What states do you see particularly as vulnerable, chance to flip? What areas are you looking at there and dealing with voters?
Yeah, for sure. So, top line, in Erie County, we have the opportunity to flip that seat. Very important seat there. We're organizing on a few schools in that county, and the engagement is super important, and the conversations that we're having are super important. We're looking to make sure that Susan Wild keeps her seat, and pushing through in that congressional district. PA 10 is a big opportunity to flip as well. So we have infrastructure in Dauphin County and the surrounding areas to make sure that we're holding and flipping those seats as well.
And what about on the presidential level? I mean, let's be completely honest. Joe Biden wasn't the first choice of anybody that any voter we're talking about now. How are you dealing? Well, first of all, what are you hearing from people on the streets as you talk about the presumptive nominee, and what sort of feedback? Because we've seen things that run the gamut from blue no matter who. Although there are more people willing to say, I don't know if anyone is better than someone better. And so, how are you addressing this? Are you confronting this when you talk to people, and how are you talking to people about this?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Last week, once Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race, obviously Bernie Sanders was a candidate that really appeals to young people. A lot of his issues are some of our evergreen issues that we always care about. So what we did was we have a letter addressed to Biden. It was an open letter signed along with the Justice Democrats, the Sunrise Movement, a lot of youth-based organizations that really outline the issues that we care about and that Biden will have to move left on if he really wants to earn the youth vote. And in our conversations with people on the ground, we obviously recognize that there's a lot of work left to do between now and November to get that enthusiasm and make sure that people turn out. Like we said, obviously, we're going to be focusing on down ballot races, and those down ballot races are really things that energize young people as well. But we recognize at this point, just having anti-Trump messaging isn't going to be enough to win the presidency. We're going to need to see a lot of movement and a lot of commitment really to champion those values that young people have.
And is that what do you think the reality is of having someone like Joe Biden sort of moving a little farther left on some important issues? Because certainly, like I said, we can't really afford to have anybody stay home in November, certainly. So are you guys seeing from briefings, whatever you're getting, are you seeing a willingness of Joe Biden to at least consider sort of moving a little farther left on some issues?
Yeah, we saw a day after the letter came out that Joe Biden expressed a willingness to lower the Medicare age, some forgiveness for low-income public college students. And we're seeing that as a sign of life from the Biden campaign, a willingness to move, and something that we're seeing as a good sign, and really a willingness to listen to progressives. In that letter that we had, we outlined different cabinet positions that we would like to see him take up, people to put in those cabinet positions. And we really see it as a beginning of a process. I mean, we have a long time through November, and it's a good sign that we're opening that conversation and putting progressives on the table.
In the midterms, we had a lot of, especially at the state level, we had a lot of old incumbent Democrats fall. And this election cycle, we saw a lot of old incumbent Democrats get the hell out of the way before anything else could happen to them. How much is that because of the strength of the growing youth vote in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I can talk on that, and that's definitely a great talking point there of, the work that we did in 2018 is what's going to drive us to success going into 2020, exactly as you said it. And, just some fun numbers here. In 2018, 59% of young Pennsylvanians that we as NextGen organized, they voted, and that's 20 points higher than their general age block. So we know that the work that we do, we know that the conversations that we're having in these really important elections where there's good progressive running, it is working. Nearly 40% of the 2020 electorate is going to be 35 or under.
Wow.
We have to organize on that momentum that we had in 2018 and make it grow even bigger than that 59% of folks who turned out.
What sort of numbers in terms of voter base are you guys reaching out to? What's your sort of email collection?
Talk to are able to communicate with around 3,000 folks via email, and hundreds of thousands of voters via text. I think a cool number around text messages is that as young people, we open text messages at a rate of 99%, right? So the amount of numbers and the amount of people that we're able to communicate with via text message is going to expand our message, push out our message far and wide. And we definitely rely on these digital pieces of organizing to grow and build on our on the ground program.
Just a couple more questions here, and we were talking with Sarah Egan and Larissa Schweitzer of NextGen America. They're on the ground here in Pennsylvania, talking to voters, trying to court that young vote, which I don't think it probably takes too much to convince a young voter not to vote on the other ticket, but they're doing good work out there. So what do you guys have on? Well, before I ask you that, let me ask you this: how do things change, and how easily are you going to be able to transition once we are a little more opened up? And you would hope that certainly by the general election, things are obviously opened up a little more. Hopefully by at least midsummer, hopefully things are opening up a little more. So how easy is the transition sort of back into traditional sort of get out the vote efforts? Or does this show you that this can be either just as effective or at least deserves, more level of a greater level of commitment than maybe you had done before?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, we spent the past 4 years building relationships on college campuses, and we are not stopping now. We've had registered student organizations on our college campuses that we've taken online. We have Zoom meetings with our executive boards on our college campuses, right, to make sure that they're engaged, to make sure that they still know our messaging, that they still know what our goals are. So then when we are able to organize back on campus, we're still up and ready to go, and our communities are still engaged with us on the ground. And I think you're right. We spent the last few weeks getting all of the members of our teams on Twitter, right? Because we know that organic organizing, that organic social media engagement is 100% a priority. And we are definitely going to utilize it to supplement our organizing once we're back on the ground. Kind of think of it as, a rotating circle. Online engagement leads to engagement on the ground and then back online, right? We talk about this as a cycle, and we need to definitely emphasize each of these bits of organizing and these strategies of organizing in similar ways.
And just what kind of things do you guys have planned for the next few months? What kind of events or efforts, or is it just going to be kind of more of the same, making sure you're reaching as many people as you can and talking about the importance of the upcoming election?
Yeah, well, I think going forward, and definitely Sarah, hop in here, we are focusing on the conversations around vote by mail. We've already texted around 200,000 folks the vote by mail application, making sure that they're educated on the processes of applying and submitting their ballot. So if there is, an instance in November of 2020 when we also all have to vote by mail, everyone has the steps down pat, ready to go. And working out all the kinks now, so it's as smooth as can be in November. Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one?
Yeah, I just say, again, we also have a lot of issue advocacy that we care about. So you'll see us circulating a lot of national petitions to ask Congress to, right now we're asking them to take more action on COVID-19, We also have another petition that talks about vote by mail, that we are lucky in Pennsylvania that this is the first cycle with vote by mail, and we've already seen an overwhelming influx to those county registrar offices that are receiving vote by mail applications. But obviously, we're going to need a lot of support for those offices and making sure they're fully funded and staffed and able to handle that. But yeah, and I'd also say obviously 420 and Earth Day are coming up, so we will be having digital actions to support the legalization of marijuana at the federal level, and also including in those conversations expungement for criminal records related to marijuana charges.
It's important stuff for sure. Larissa Schweitzer, Sarah Egan, thank you for joining me today. And thank everyone else for joining us for the Pittsburgh Current podcast. You can get your new digital issue on this Tuesday, and our current issue is out on stands as your email is to stand. You know what I'm saying. By this point, you should know what I'm saying, people. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.